Hey guys, I'm learning TFT, and in this video, I'm going to address an announcement that Mortdog just made in a video that he posted this morning, where he addressed a bunch of balance changes, specifically the amount of discontent in the community with the balance level in 14.2. And at the end of the video, he specifically talks about how he has been receiving an excessive amount of hate from the community. Of course, this is usually a minority of the community, but he's going to stop making X posts, patch rundowns, and likely not streaming. And basically, he said that the haters won. So in this video, I'm going to play the brief clip where he talks about why he's stepping away. And then I'm going to do a meta mindset kind of talking about this topic of hate burns yourself. I'll talk about kind of the community response from some of the top players in the community, some of my experience from this kind of stuff, since I did run a mobile gaming startup in the past, and I was the CEO and founder, and I also had experience receiving death threats in the past. I'll talk a little bit about psychology and philosophy of blame, hate, and what is kind of the antidote to it, as well as how some of the members of the community are reacting to those haters, which may not always be productive, especially because a large part of the draw for why I love TFT is not just the game itself, but also the community. And Mortdog has played a huge role in shaping the positivity of the community, especially compared to other games out there, specifically games as a service. He has set the benchmark for how game developers should approach interacting with the community and valuing the community to the extent that he does, which means he puts up with a lot of shit in order to do that. And I don't think a lot of people truly appreciate what he brings to the table. I really do honestly appreciate what Mortdog has done and will continue to do just kind of behind the scenes. And I'm glad that he is stepping away from a lot of the vitriol that he is exposing himself to. And hopefully this can be a lesson to all of us, not just the haters out there, but the role that we each play when it comes to this kind of stuff. And I think this is also a broader reflection in our society today. The level of hate and animosity in the world is rising as people find more and more discontent with their own lives. And instead of being introspective, a lot of people expel hatred and blame outwardly instead of looking inwardly. And I'm going to talk a lot about kind of the psychology of all that with a meta mindset. So this video is not going to include any TFT content, but I just want to use this as an opportunity to talk about the impact of all of this from a psychological community standpoint and what we can each do, even if we are not necessarily the ones that have been contributing to the hate, even the role that we play and the way that we shape, which is not just useful in this TFT community context, but also useful when we think about the way that the world is evolving moving forward. So I'm going to start off by first playing Mortdog's clip.
I do want to talk about one more thing. I'm going to be stepping away from extra stuff for a while. The last few weeks, months have been really rough in the spotlight as the sort of target for a lot of the frustrations around TFT. All you have to do is click on any one of my Twitter posts recently and read the replies. I've been getting it a lot lately, to a point where I'm pretty burned out. I put a lot of extra effort in, and sometimes, I've been advised many times that I put in too much effort. And at this point, I don't know how else to phrase it other than the haters win. They got to me, which sucks to admit after 6 years. But I'm going to take a break because I can't take much more of it. It is affecting me very harshly. So no more X posts for me for a while. I'm going to be staying off the platform. No more patch rundowns. Those were always an optional thing. They're not a Riot sponsored thing. I don't have to do them. So I'm not going to for a while. I'm probably not going to stream at all for a while. We'll see how long. If I do stream, it might be because I really want to play a game and I have some time. I don't know if I'll do TFT streams for a while. But yeah, like I said, the level of animosity I've been getting has finally got to me after all this time. I don't know what triggered it recently. I also know that, to be fair, I'm not entirely innocent here because I've been getting so much. it has made me extra snappy, and so sometimes I snap back, and it's a
All right, so that's kind of the news that kind of happened recently. And before I get to the community response, I do want to talk about one of the psychological concepts that I was going to go into, just because of what Mortdog's saying, that he is not guilt-free in this either. He has been contributing. And part of this is that when we aren't able to psychologically calm ourselves and look inwards into how we are contributing to the amount of hate we put out into the world, B.F. Skinner, a psychologist, actually found that in experiments that if two organisms which have been coexisting peacefully receive painful shocks, and these can be independently caused, they immediately exhibit characteristic patterns of aggression toward each other. The aggressive behavior is not necessarily directed toward the actual source of stimulation. It may be displaced toward any convenient person or object. And so this psychological concept can explain why, for a lot of people, Mortdog becomes the scapegoat. He is the face of TFT in the community, and so everyone throws their flaming coals at Mort. And I've seen some of the stuff he's posted in the past, and he's gotten death threats. He's gotten people saying that he should just go out and kill himself. It's like pretty egregious stuff. And I've talked about this in a prior meta mindset as well. And when that kind of stuff happens, it is important that Mortdog take this step to protect himself, because nobody should put themselves up to that level of animosity. But I'll get into kind of the psychology a little bit more. Before I do that, I'm going to go into the community response. Frodan said that we get that people were annoyed, but now that the haters have flamed Mortdog, we get less communication, less info, less interaction with the devs. This is a massive TFT community loss. Reddit said, as someone who's taken long breaks from TFT to play other games, part of this community doesn't know how good we have it with the dev team and how vocal the dev team is compared to other games, and how frequently TFT patches, and how much the dev team values the community and respects the player. He does argue that the balance isn't perfect, but it's a really hard game to balance, and that the dev team is really as good as it can get. Demacian Raptor, who has also contributed to some negativity with Mortdog, said that in the recent years of TFT growth, and as the player base started to grow, there's increased amount of haters, especially toward Mortdog. And it shows that the game is growing and there's more players, but on the other hand, it's hurting the community. And he does acknowledge that his own hands are not clean in that. And so I think we all recognize that this is a big loss to the community, and many of these players, top players, have Milk also, and I'll go into like a tweet that Milk also mentioned. These are top players who have benefited from how much the Riot dev team and Mortdog himself have just been willing to communicate and cultivate community as a value, which I was a mobile games developer and founder, and a lot of gaming companies don't value community. The degree that Mortdog and the TFT dev team does value community is extremely rare. And for Mortdog to put his own face out there to be the the scapegoat for people to hit and throw shit at is says a lot to how much he has valued the community. And so I agree with Frodan that this is a huge loss, and with Reddit's that most game companies don't care about the community anywhere near as much as the TFT and specifically Mortdog does. And again, for me personally, is a huge reason why this game is so interesting to me and why I make videos like this. I'm not making these videos to really monetize. I'm not making it to get a ton of views or grow a channel to generate revenue. I do this because I find it valuable to interact with you, the viewer. And when people message me on Discord and in the game, and I'm hoping that I can at some point participate in some of these like world land tournaments, and like that is what's interesting to me. So when something like this happens, like I get emotional about it, and it's a big loss for all of us. And so I also want to add that from my own experience, I got death threats running my mobile gaming company. This was like back in 2009. We would make we like had a mafia game back then, and of course that's going to attract a certain type of audience. And when we put out content that people didn't like we would get death threats to the point where it's like I was wondering, like, is this even worth doing? And like Mortdog has stated that he has received death threats in the past as well. And when we make games that reach a large percentage of the population, this kind of stuff will inevitably happen. And yet it is when we are silent as a community, when the vocal minority of haters really rise up and the rest of the community does not actively do something about it, especially before something like, Mortdog making this statement comes up, that's when everybody loses. That when hate burns yourself, right? It's not just when, like, my son had an incident with some of his close friends at his birthday party where I was trying to communicate to him this idea as well, because one of our family values is exchange value for value, which means if you're friendly with other people, other friendly are more likely to be friendly with you. But if you treat other people poorly, they are more likely to treat you poorly. And a further corollary of that my wife and I were trying to teach him is that he at a birthday party, his birthday party, had a friend who was kind of emotionally manipulating one of his other friends. And my son wasn't actively doing anything about it. In fact, he kind of rallied on the side of the friend who was kind of picking on the other kid. And I was making a point to my son that, like, I would hope that you, especially as you grow up, choose to be friends and have a community with whom you feel like all the members of that community, all the members of that friend group feel like they are safe, that they belong. And I was asking my son, like, do you feel like your friend who was getting picked on felt like he belonged and that he was appreciated and loved by this friend group? And my son said no. And I was like, well, it was your birthday party, and for you to not say anything, and furthermore somewhat add on to like the side of the bullying in a sense, you were contributing to creating an environment that was opposite of the values that we are hoping you can stand for. And frankly, that's partially why I am speaking up about this topic, because it's important to me. Another more recent situation that occurred, and this is a little bit more tangential, but I think it's still relevant. I coach my daughter's softball team, and there was an incident a couple weeks ago where I usually show up at practice early, and one of the other dads was carpooling four of the girls on the softball team. They all go to the same school. And when we got there, the dad was screaming like at the top of his lungs at the girls. And when the girls saw me, they ran over to me, and my son and daughter were there too. And the girls were like crying. They were like inconsolable, blabbering. I could not understand a word that was coming out of their mouths because they were just so emotionally triggered. And I had to figure out how to unravel that situation. Like, I talked to the dad. Well, first I was like, because I couldn't understand the girls. So I asked them if they wanted to have some alone time to calm down first, and they said yes. They hid behind like this big tree behind the backstop of the field. I spoke to the dad briefly, and the dad was like, the girls were out of control. They were being just like completely obnoxious. One of the girls had actually kicked him with her cleats, which is not great, but he's the grown up, he's the adult that's supposed to be responsible for keeping the girls safe. And so it was just all around a bad situation. And I had to speak with the girls separately, help them calm down before practice started. And this is like kind of borderline, like mandated reporter stuff, like where you kind of have to consider whether you report this. And I was actually talking with my therapist about this, and she was actually saying that, and she's had situations where she's had to report stuff to mandated reporters, just where there is a government agency that is responsible for receiving information about situations where parents are kind of over the line and emotionally or physically abusive to their children. And they're supposed to be basically inform and educate parents and protect children, right? And my therapist is actually saying that a lot of the times the mandated reporter staff is just overwhelmed with cases where there are plenty of situations where it's not just yelling, it's like physical abuse where like nothing happens because there's just too many cases to have to go over. And so like, again, in the context of what happened with Mortdog here, like, I'm not surprised that he's received so much animosity, right? Like, the amount of hate that exists in the world is very large, but the amount of love and kindness is also very large. But the challenge is that all it takes is a small minority of haters to like destroy the world for the rest of the people that are actually being kind and loving toward each other. If you think about like, you know, a nuclear arms race, like all it takes is for one or two people to press the nuke buttons and we all get blown up, right? And so like that goes back to the idea that there's Gandhi had the quote that an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind, right? Like, yes, that was the Old Testament. That was one of the ideals is if you perceive someone has wronged you, you go back and you poke their eye out, right? If someone kills your child, you go back and kill their child in the old days. If someone disrespects you, you escalate, right? And the problem is, as technology has made it easier and easier, anonymously, digitally, to be able to throw negative energy in other people's ways with minimal risk and just accountability, like this is what happens. And yet, there is stuff that we can do as a community to be able to respond to that, to be able to cultivate a more positive community so that it minimizes the likelihood of this kind of stuff happening. All right, so I'm going to talk about kind of some of the psychology of blame, and which can hopefully help us get a better understanding of why it happens, and then talk a little bit about like what is the antidote to blame and hate. So Siddhartha Gautama said, holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned. So that's like when you are unable to forgive someone and you want to throw hatred at someone else, it just sits like there's a negative energy in your body. And I actually do believe that there is a physical aspect in your body that people who are angry actually are more likely, and I don't know if there's been research done on this, but I wouldn't be surprised if like the more of an angry person you are, the more likely you are to like develop cancer or some type of physical manifestation of your psychological like anger, because it burns you on the inside. And then not only that, you start expelling it out into the world, right? All the people that throw hatred at Mortdog, the people that threw death threats at me when I ran my startup, the dad that was screaming at the kids, right? Like when we are unable to control our anger, to be able to transform our anger into a positive, constructive energy, then it becomes destructive to both ourselves and to the people around us. Blame is a way we lie to ourselves, said Robert Karen. It is not just a way of refusing to look at who we are or avoiding responsibility. It is also a defense against knowing our pain. To face that pain is to begin to mourn what was too overwhelming to be mourned before. So a core idea here is that Karen would argue that underlying hatred and blame, so these people that are throwing hate at Mortdog, is we feel uncomfortable, that we feel like we have been wronged somehow, that there is some deep pain that we do not want to confront. And so the blame and the hate is a way that we avoid looking at that. We shove it under the rug, we throw it into the closet. And the thing is, when we do that, we're externalizing this blame where we are unconscious of the underlying pain to ourselves. And yet, when we lie to ourselves in this way, it's not like that pain is going away. We're just like pushing it deep under the surface. And then like that, right? It's like you have this hot coal, you're grasping it to try to throw at someone else, and you're not really realizing that by putting the blame out there, you're just holding on to that pain and you're burning yourself. Fred Luskin said, holding people accountable for their actions is not the same as blaming them for how you feel. So there's a distinction between, and Mortdog himself mentioned that he is not innocent in this matter, and he has likely contributed to this vicious cycle of negativity. But you don't need to say that, oh, everything Mortdog like has done or said is correct. Like everyone makes mistakes. He'd be the first one to say that he has made mistakes when it comes to game design and balance. So we can still hold Mortdog accountable for his actions and game balance, right? But that doesn't mean that when you feel bad or you feel pain, that he is responsible for that. There's a clear distinction there. Eric Hoffer, in his book, The True Believer, said, "It is understandable that those who fail should incline to blame the world for their failure." And this happens often when people, and this happens a lot too, especially with compulsive gamblers, that in like Vegas, for example, that when someone loses and they maybe this is like the game becomes a metaphor or reflection of their life where they're unhappy with whatever their life state is, and then because they can't actually take out their anger, pain, blame on the real source of that, they channel it through TFT in this game, and Mortdog just happens to be, right, like going back to Skinner's displaced toward any convenient person. In this case, that's Mortdog, right? And so the cause of the thing, the painful shock, may or may not have been Mortdog, but he just happens to be the one that's conveniently available because he's putting out videos, right? He's putting out X posts, patch rundowns, streams. He's the face of TFT. And so then he becomes the convenient person to displace all of that hatred. Hoffer continues to say, passionate hatred can give meaning and purpose to an empty life. And I strongly believe this, that a lot of the people that produce the most hate out into the world are likely the ones, and when I was a child, I thought that like true evil existed, and like I kind of believed in like the story of like kind of like the devil, even though I'm not religious. But it's like, where does evil come from? And why does hate exist in the world? And I think Hoffer has like a really deep insight into human psychology, that a lot of times this hatred comes because they find their lives empty and meaningless, and they live a victim mentality. And so that passionate hatred can give them a source of meaning, that it's like, oh, like the world is the problem, not me. Like I'm not accountable for the things that are wrong with my life. It's the world. And so again, Mortdog just happens to be the convenient person that happens to be there, right? Adlai Stevenson said, "My definition of a free society is a society where it is safe to be unpopular." And so we can, and I think this is just so true in the society we live in today, especially with the direction of like where the world is going. Trump like kind of just closing off a lot of walls, right? Like a free, open society is one in which you remove barriers, walls, and a more closed one is where you put up more walls, right? Like you don't want to be open, you don't want to be free. You create more villains, you create more scapegoats, which is how Trump fans the flames, right? He's a master manipulator in that sense. And the only way for someone to be safe when they're unpopular is one in which we as a society, we as a community, have worked on ourselves introspectively to the point that we understand the psychology of why blame and hate and anger and pain occur, and work to transform that, be introspective, look within, but also look without. And I'll talk about the antidote of that. That antidote to hate is not hate, right? And I'll talk about this really briefly. Like MLK Jr. said, darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Right? So like the solution to this hate is not throwing more hate out there. And that is also where we as a community can contribute in a way, even if you are not necessarily one of the people that contributed to the hate. Leo Tolstoy said, "A man changes constantly. He flows like a river, and every new day he differs from what he was before. He was stupid and became clever. He was evil and became kind at heart. You cannot judge another person. The moment you blame him, he becomes someone different." And this is also why I am not a big fan of cancel culture, especially how it has kind of evolved in the last like decade. Because cancel culture and this idea of blaming another person implies that people can't change. And yet, what neuroscience has taught us, there's an idea of neuroplasticity, is that people can change, people can learn, people can evolve. And when you blame and cancel other people with the assumption that they are fixed, that they cannot change, that they cannot grow, that they cannot learn, we are reinforcing this idea that someone is just fundamentally evil and wrong, right? Like one of my biggest learnings, especially early on when my kids were younger, that has helped me become a better parent is this idea that when disciplining a child, when a child is throwing a tantrum, or like at one point my son went through a biting phase where he like bit me, or my daughter like accidentally elbows me in the head, quote accidentally, which is what she claimed, when she was like not happy with something I did, that as a parent, there's a distinction between viewing your child as a bad kid versus viewing your child as a good kid who made a poor choice. Because how you react to that child in that situation, depending on your fundamental belief on human nature in that regard, affects how you respond. And this is also relevant in the sense that our entire judicial system and our prison system reflects that fundamental belief in human nature, which is if you think someone, like let's say there's a murderer or even like someone that breaks the law, our default assumption is that they are a bad person. They should go in jail and, for the most part, stay there. Like, separate them from the rest of human society. They are the bad people. We are the good people. And not only does it reflect on them, but there is this added psychological benefit that, like, oh, we are the good guys and they are the bad guys. And that is also a key idea, that when we watch like movies, there's always the protagonist, the antagonist. And one of the big reasons I enjoy movies where there is not a clear protagonist and antagonist, and a lot of times it's unclear, the moral decisions that someone makes in some cases may be viewed as good. The bad guys may be making good choices, and then the good guy may be making poor choices. And it depends on the context and what experiences that they've gone through in the past, and how they're evolving their psychology. And I think that's also an idea that my wife and I try to teach our kids, that like, that there isn't necessarily a good or evil person, that people make poor or good decisions, and that everyone can change, everyone can evolve. And the more that we can forgive people, the more that we can understand and be compassionate and curious into why someone made the decision that they made, the more likely we are to be able to change the other person without necessarily like feeling forced to change them. Of course, you gotta keep yourself safe and defend yourself, right? Which is what Mortdog's doing here, right? Like, set firm boundaries, because that's something you can control. But like, the more that you are able to understand this idea, I think the more we can address this broader issue, both in this TFT community with the Mortdog situation and in our society at large. James Baldwin said, "I imagine one of the reasons people cling to their hate so stubbornly is because they sense once hate is gone, they will be forced to deal with pain." So this goes back to what Robert Karen was saying, that underlying the hate is a sense of pain. It's a sense of mourning, that something's wrong with our lives, that it's deeply uncomfortable. And when we don't know how to process that pain, which is why I feel like therapy is something that I found immensely helpful in my life. And I believe that in a healthy society, everyone should have access to quality healthcare, which also includes mental health care, which includes therapy. Of course, there's also a lot of bad therapists out there, which is why therapy sometimes gets also a bad rep. In addition, historically, therapy has been primarily used for people with depression, anxiety conditions, mental health conditions, whereas I personally believe that therapy can be used, and this is more of a new concept in the last 15 to 20 years, with Martin Seligman and the research that he's done out of the University of Pennsylvania with positive psychology, where it's like strength building, not just like how to cure people that are mentally sick. But of course, the people that are least likely to want to receive therapy are the ones that likely would benefit the most from it, and also the rest of the society would benefit the most from it. All right, so self versus other. Rumi the poet said, "Yesterday I was clever, so I wanted to change the world. Today I'm wise, so I am changing myself." Jordan Peterson said something similar: "Set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world." And a Chinese proverb says, "He who blames others has a long way to go on his journey. He who blames himself is halfway there. He who blames no one has arrived." So there's this idea of forgiveness. And so the first step is we externalize blame. Then the next step is we internalize blame. And then we have to learn how to both forgive the outside world, forgive the inside world. And then that is where you can actually truly find peace. When you can confront the pain underlying the blame, and we understand how it occurred, and furthermore created separation in our identity that we are not the pain itself, we are not at fault of the pain. That is how healing and conflict resolution and both external and internal peace will arise within the world. So the antidote to hate isn't hate. I talked about MLK's quote. Gandhi said, "An eye for an eye makes the whole world blind." And so I wanted to talk about that briefly because it's in our community. We already have situations where hate is responding to hate. Demasian Raptor, who did, make that Reddit post, which I think was very positive, proceeded to then also have and I've done a lot of coaching with Demasian, and he lives in a tough environment. Like, he lives in a war environment. We actually had a coaching session where he had to reschedule because there were bombs being dropped in Israel, and he had to go to a bomb shelter. He said in the last year, he had, like, when we were doing coaching, he had like 1 or 2 friends like die in bombings. And so it's like, it's understandable that he lives in a war zone, right? And he said, sad day for TFT. Mortdog deserves a lot of love and respect. If you are the one that posted toxicity toward Mortdog, fuck you, right? Milk said, fuck the haters, just keep doing what you want to do, right? So, like, Milk's not being as direct about it. But, going back to this idea that the more hate we put out into the world, we're just all burning ourselves. Like, it's like, it doesn't matter who started it, right? Like, this is like when my kids argue with each other, like, and they're like, Mom, like, my brother did this, and then our son's like, Mom, my sister did that. And it's just like, at the end of the day, I don't care who started it. Like, if we are throwing more hate, it's just adding fuel to the fire. Like, hatred is just fire, and everyone just gets more and more burned. And that is the surest way. And I'm trying to teach my kids this, to be leaders within their friend groups and communities, because as the next generation gets older, it's not just nuclear weapons that we have to worry about. Like, drone bombs and like the level of scale, like we've talked, like we are aware of school shootings, right? The level of impact that any single person can have on destroying the rest of the world is only getting magnified as AI and technology are evolving more and more on an exponential scale. And so I personally believe that it is more important now than ever before that we as a community, not just for TFT, but for the world, set an example for future generations. That these are some of the most important concepts that when we come across people that have wronged us, when we come across people that are throwing hate out into the world, our response to them matters. The way that we treat the people that are producing violence in the world matters, because that creates a vicious cycle. The only cure is love. And I wholeheartedly believe that. I might not be the best person at practicing it. I strive to do it. Like, for example, the dad that was screaming at the girls, like, I was trying to understand where he was coming from. I was trying to treat him in a respectful manner, but yet holding him accountable for his actions, right? Like, I had to speak with the other parents of the other children that were being yelled at. I made the suggestion, like, to the other parents, like, probably not have, I would suggest that your child not carpool with that dad anymore, right? Like there are consequences. Abraham Lincoln said, I don't like that man. I must get to know him better. And Carl Jung, the psychologist, said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. This is a very deep insight that I've had, which is that the things that annoy us most about other people oftentimes reflect some deep insecurity, some deep anxiety or pain that we ourselves feel, and that is why we are triggered emotionally in such a heightened manner. And so similar to what Lincoln here is saying, is that the more that we can come from a perspective of being non-judgmental, of listening to the other person's perspective instead of immediately jumping and attacking them when they have wronged us in some way, the more not only that we can contribute to peace and community in the world, but also lead us to have a better understanding of ourselves. Curiosity. David Bradford and Carol Robbins said, curiosity is key. Thinking, I wonder why this isn't working, is much more productive than blaming another person when something goes awry. So, kind of like the lens of Lincoln, of what Young is saying here, the more open-minded we are, we can take a deep breath, like in that situation where the dad was yelling at the girls. Like, I had to first take a deep breath because that was a lot to handle. I was just expecting to go into practice. It's already a lot to deal with. 10 girls that are all like running around, like messing around. But to deal with that, with the screaming dad and the crying kids, like that was a lot. And I had to really center myself, take a deep breath, and try to be as non-judgmental as possible, be curious, because that is the mental state in which we can actually open our minds to new ideas, which is frankly a really important value for TFT in general too, but also for in life. Because that's the way that when we can understand where the other person's coming from, when we can understand that people change, when we can understand that they are dealing with some sense of pain underneath, that their life might have a sense of meaninglessness and emptiness, that they might have received some type of painful shock recently. For example, there was a situation at my wife's work recently where someone did some very questionable stuff and was actually fired from her workplace. And later on, it was found out that his dad had actually passed away the previous week. Instead of taking time off, he decided to go on medication that had some pretty serious side effects, right? And so then he was, again, displacing aggression toward any convenient person or object. He was burning himself. He was burning the people around him. He not only lost his dad, he lost his job. He hurt the people around him, right? And so the more we can be curious and open-minded instead of immediately attacking, the more we can contribute to peace and community in the world. In the book, The 15 Commandments of Conscious Leadership, there's a quote that says, shifting is moving from closed to open, from defensive to curious, from wanting to be right to wanting to learn, and from fighting for the survival of the individual ego to leading from a place of security and trust. If we want this TFT community to be one in which this game can last a lot longer, because this game will only continue to be a great game as long as the community is strong, right? Like if Mortdog says, I've had enough, he decides to leave, then the rest of the dev team there, leadership decays because people lose morale, the talent level goes down, the game starts to suffer, then top players start quitting, then fewer tournaments, less prize money, less viewers. That's like the tip of the iceberg that eventually leads to the decline of the game and where we all stop playing TFT in 5 to 10 years. My hope is that this community can stay strong and have this game last a lot longer. Of course, that's breaking the trend because most games have a short lifespan. Like 6 years, Mortdog's been doing this. That's a long lifespan. 6 years is a long time for anyone to work at any single company, especially in our generation. Like, if we as a community want this game to continue to grow, to continue to evolve and thrive, there needs to be a shift, this shift, right? From closed to open, from defensive to curious, to be open-minded, to wanting to learn, to wanting to see the other perspective, leading from a place of security and trust. That is the way that we can keep this game going. That is the way that we can continue to make this community amazing and get Mortdog energetically back into prioritizing community and wanting to be a part of this community. There's an interesting comment in, this was, I believe, a comment in one of the Reddit posts, and this is under the topic of gratitude. This really is one of those bad moments of vocal minority illusion. 99% of players appreciate Mort. The 1% can be extremely loud, blah, blah, blah. The only way to counteract this effect is for fans to be a countervailing force. That way you don't only have a vocal negative minority, but a vocal positive majority. And I think this is like hitting the nail on the head. And so on the topic of gratitude, it's really easy for us to kind of complain when things aren't going well. And it's not really human nature to really like appreciate and show gratitude to, especially to the people that bring us joy and happiness when things are going well, because we just kind of take that stuff for granted. And yet, I think Perfect Tangerine's hitting the nail on the head that the only way to continue to have positivity and joy in community and the people that bring you happiness and joy in your life is to be proactively grateful, appreciative, to take action in being vocal in sharing that positivity, because otherwise they will only hear the negativity. There's a reason that there's something called the shit sandwich when you give people feedback. There's a reason that the best coaches in the world, there's actually an amazing clip on Steve Kerr, the head coach of the Warriors, who has the highest win percentage of any NBA coach in NBA history during the playoffs, where he was giving constructive feedback to a player, and he said something along the lines of I'm like botching this, but something along the lines of like God, I wish I had your like boldness and your aggression to the game, something along those lines, and your confidence. Oh, that's what he said. Like, God, I really wish I had your confidence, because this was, I think, one of the young, I think it was Anthony Edwards during the Olympics team, and I think he was giving him feedback on like shot selection, I believe, and so the constructive criticism was like, okay, we gotta work on your shot selection, but the praise was actually like, man, you have amazing confidence, especially for your age, right? Like, so how do you show gratitude to other people's strengths and the things that they bring to your life that you truly appreciate, that if it was gone, like with Mortdog basically saying like, I'm stepping away from this stuff, like, oh, like, no, now you can say, I really wish that wasn't true, right? But a lot of times you aren't really grateful and appreciative for the things that you have until they're gone. And so the more that you can proactively show gratitude, the more likely you are that you're going to bring positivity back into your life and keep positivity in your life. And so this is kind of the underlying theme of what Perfect Tangerine is saying here, which I agree that the more we can have the vocal positive majority give feedback, and this isn't just to Mortdog, it's to like Frodan, to the Sub-Zero arc, other active contributors in the community who help make this community come to life. Whenever someone receives negativity, it's important for the other people who appreciate those people to be a counteracting force. So Robert Emmons and Michael McCullough said, gratitude promotes human well-being by mitigating dispositions to resentment, regret, and envy. So not only is gratitude helping to promote happiness and joy, but it actually minimizes the likelihood that you feel pain, hatred, blame. And Meister Eckhart said, Seneca, pagan master, asks, what is the best consolation in suffering and distress? And gives this answer. It is this, that we should accept everything as if we had desired it and prayed for it. So the more that we can show appreciation for what we do have, instead of blaming the world for what we don't have, the more we are able to bring positivity and joy into our own lives, the more that we are able to bring positivity and joy into the community and the relationships around us. And so, with that said, just as a final note to Mortdog, I want to say, and I believe the first time I entered a game with you, Mortdog, I messaged you saying thank you for creating such an amazing game, for building such an amazing team, for prioritizing community the way that you have. This is one of the most, this TFT is probably the best game I've ever played in my life, and I've been playing online games since I think 95. And I think you've done an amazing job in cultivating this community, building an amazing game, in just bringing positivity and joy into the world around you. And it's really unfortunate, and my heart goes out to you for just the level of toxicity that you've received. I hope that you are able to create some boundaries for yourself and know that none of that is on you, that other people have their shit that they're dealing with. I would suggest, if you can, to work with a therapist, because I think this is amazing material for you to work through some of your own stuff, any traumas that you have underlying this that may have triggered it. Like you mentioned that it's some stuff recently that occurred. And I hope that you are able to come back stronger from this. I hope that at some point you can come back and do some posts, patch rundowns, whatever it is. I hope you don't stop. I hope you don't cut yourself off from the community, because I think this is what's been so great about TFT as a game, and what you have contributed to the game is not, I think a large part of what you've contributed to this game is not just about the game itself, the mechanics of the game, the design of the game, but I think a huge part of your contribution has been the community itself and why this game has been as successful as it has. So I just want to say that I want to say I appreciate you, and thank you. Thank you for making a game and community that I've devoted so much of my time and energy towards, and receive so much joy from. So yeah, I really do appreciate you. And the rest of you watching this, I appreciate I appreciate all of you too, especially all of you who have posted in my comments, who have reached out to me on Discord, messaged me in the game. I would not be playing this game if it weren't for this community. And it's a sad day for me to see this. And I've actually gotten my son. He's 8 now. He's been playing since he's 5. And I've gotten my son into TFT in large part because I think this community is so amazing. I hope this game continues to stick around longer so that he can start interacting with you. I've actually worked with him to he started creating some YouTube videos on, like, he's super into F1 racing, so he started creating some YouTube videos on that to just share with his friends. But I could totally see him like interacting with this community, posting YouTube videos at some point in the future as well. And I hope that this game is around, this community is around 5 years down the line when he's like 13 and can start doing more of that without me worrying about the people out there who are more negative. But I think all of us, if you are watching this video, thank you for watching to this point. But I think all of us can rally and use this not as a negative thing that shuts us down as a community, but I hope that we can all use this as a positive force to raise all of us up, to not throw hate at the haters, but rather for us to use this as a positive learning for us to grow this community together. And yeah, throw love into the world. Look within. Be curious. Be open. Thanks for watching. I appreciate you, and I'll see you in the next one.